And we're back, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you once again for tuning in to another episode of the Feel Good Show. And I can't believe it. Another week has come and gone and come again. And here we are, waiting with bated breath for words of wisdom and moments of meditation. So, ladies and gentlemen, I bring to the WAPJ studios, the one and only T-Boz. Good morning, sir.
Good morning, Jock. Good morning, everyone. I'm coming to you live from Los Angeles in a recording studio. After my singing debut last year, Capitol Records offered me a recording contract, so I'm out here laying down some tracks. So I'm only kidding. Come on in, everyone. Plenty of seats. There's some new couches, nice lounging chairs they put in with cup holders. So come on in, grab your pens and pencils, and you could use your iPads if you want. Come on in. You want to take notes, fine. If you don't want to take notes, then that's okay with us. So good morning, Jock. It's Friday Eve, as you mentioned, the end of June already. Where have 6 months gone? My goodness, 6 months from now, you'll all be returning the presents you got for Christmas. So welcome in, everyone. Thank you for having me on the show, Jock. And let's get rolling with our show because we've got a lot to do and a great song and all of that. I want to thank everyone for the nice compliments I got on last week's show. Now, we've been doing this show, Jock and I, for about 30 years now. And of all the takeaway quotes, the one that resonated with everyone more than any other one I've done is the great Dave Brubeck quote, "I don't want to be taught by anyone. I want to swing on my own." So with your permission, Jock, when I sign off, from now on, I'm going to sign off with, "I want to swing on my own," because this show is about building a better you. It's about finding a better you and about following your dreams, your hopes. And I think swinging on your own, as long as you don't end up in a sling on your own, because most of us listening to this are probably over 50, but to swing on your own. And I thank everybody for all of that. Very quickly, a correction. I did that Gregorian chant, Tantum Egro Sacramentum, and a lot of people said, "Great Gregorian chant, what does it mean?" Okay, and so what it means in English is it's a new... Therefore, so great thou art is what it means. And what the song was written by St. Thomas Aquinas, and it was part of a larger piece called Pagne Lingua, and it comes at the end, and it was about the new way. In other words, in the Catholic Church, the Eucharist, and I know in all our Protestant brethren, we have a different belief with the Eucharist, but they all find it very important. And so what Tantum Egro is about the new, the Eucharist, the new way, the New Testament, and how great, therefore, how great he is, how worth thou art. So there you go with that correction. Quick shout out. Happy birthday, America, July 4th. I can't believe it already. We have a lot to be proud of, and we should stand tall and salute the flag. Now, a little challenge to all of you. Our great governor, our great governor, and I'm going to say something because it's going to lead into our theme. I didn't vote for Governor Lamont, but I am so proud of the job that he did through the pandemic. I think we're still in the pandemic in some degree. And keeping the state open, keeping us safe. We were ranked at one of the best states to live in during that, keeping business flowing, keeping kids healthy. I know we did lose a lot of people, but overall, I say he did a tremendous job and should be applauded. The reason why I bring him up is that back when the Yukon girls were in the final tournament, he encouraged everyone to put out a Connecticut, Huskies flag. And I'm all for that. I was an athlete in high school. We shared that a couple of times on this show. And I'm all for state pride and unity in the community, as Jock says, and all of that. But all of you have a little metal thing sticking on your house, unfortunately, that hasn't been used in years. And what goes in there is an American flag. So to piggyback on the great governor, I'm going to send a challenge, whoever's listening this. It's nice to put out the state flag, but what's better is put out the American flag. And it's in your closet next to the coat you haven't worn with the umbrella with a hole in it. And not the little cheesy ones that you wave at a parade. Lowe's and Home Depot has them for $20. Please, go out there. People died for us to have this great country. Every Uber driver that I ever used said to me, and most of them came from other countries you can't even pronounce, they all said Americans have no idea how good they have it and how privileged they are. And all of them, every one, and I must have had over 40 when I first started dating Veronica, all of them said as much as they enjoyed the country they grew up in, they would never go back. And they're staying in America. One gentleman said to me, Americans should kiss the ground they walk on. You know, Americans. So let's have some pride, and let's be thankful that, like my grandfathers, came to this country for a better life, and they got them. And they got it, I should say. So God bless America, and happy birthday, America. And then just a quick, Lady Boz and I out at Lake Warmont Saturday. Boys and girls, come to the northwest corner. They have a public beach there. Beautiful. Jock knows what I'm talking about. Nestled in over there between Morris and Preston and all of that, right off of 202. Boys and girls, it's the most beautiful lake you've ever seen, along with our beloved Burr Pond up here. And go out there, take the time. Like Michelangelo said to his apprentice, Antonio, draw, because you don't know how much time you have. And age will come, days will pass, the summer's going quickly, like my father used to say July 4th. Summer's over. And we used to say, what are you talking about? But as you all age, you all know what I'm talking about. So don't wait till it's too late, boys and girls. Grab some time. Come up to the northwest corner. It is beautiful. All right, our format today, we're going to talk about judgment, and that's why I did that little piece about Governor Lamont. I'm showing that I judged the man fairly, and we're going to talk about that in Scripture. I echoed and I edified what I liked about him, what I admired about him, even though I'm part of a different political party. That's the proper way to judge. But what we're going to talk about today is judgment, judgmentalism. It's an ism as well. And we're going to talk about judging. We're going to talk about good judgment. We're going to talk about bad judgment. We're going to talk about how we judge ourselves, our own personal judgment, and when we're the victims of judging. And we have some great quotes on how we can handle that. So let's start off with Matthew chapter 7, verse 1. Very simple. You don't even need to write this down. Do not judge. Boom. Okay? It doesn't say, maybe this and that. It just says do not judge. John further says in chapter 3, verse 17, right after his famous 3:16, for God did not send the Son into the world to condemn it, but to save it through him. So God came here, even though he was unhappy with our performance. He did not send his Son to condemn it. And a lot of us, myself included, what do we always say about this show, boys and girls? You, me, we. I've been the victim of judging people. I'm human. I sin just like everybody else does. But what I try to do, and I hope I'm in a room of people who feel that way, is that we try to improve ourselves. So God did not send his Son to condemn, but to save. Are we condemning people, or are we saving them? Not saving them in terms of eternal life, but saving them in different ways. Dale Carnegie, I took that class. I graduated at the top of that class. When you take that class, they tell you the 3 C's. Do not criticize, condemn, or complain. What? Dale, what are you talking about? That's what we love to do the most. We love to criticize, condemn, and complain. And Dale Carnegie turns your head around when you start that class and says, don't do that. The 3 C's, they call it. And so we're constantly fighting. We're going to talk, I hope we have time, in Galatians where Paul talks about the spirit and the flesh, right? Constantly fighting against each other. In Matthew chapter 26, verse 40, it says, the spirit is willing, but the flesh is weak, right? So we're trying to be a better person, and boom, you know who pulls us back. And we try to be a better person, and it pulls us back, all right? So it's very easy to fall into criticism, complaining, and condemning. But our job as better people, not that we're better than, but we're trying to be better, our job or our mission or our vocation is to fight against that, okay? And when we catch ourselves in the thicket of judgmentality, is walk away from it. Dietrich Bonhoeffer, born in 1906, lived in 1945, a Lutheran minister, an author of a great book called The Cost of Discipleship, says this, and then we're going to go to the break. Judging others makes us blind, whereas love is illuminating. Isn't that beautiful? Love is illuminating, like a lightning bug, right? Love is illuminating. By judging others, we blind ourselves to our own evil. Wow. And then to the grace that others deserve just like we do. Our own evil. Imagine that. We blind ourselves. So what we're doing is we're taking the focus off of us when we're judging people. We're judging them. We're taking the focus off of us. And we're going to talk a little bit later in the talk about the adulterous woman, and it goes into people's own evil. Sometimes, maybe the people in this audience are not judging. We have, like I said earlier, but when we're judging people or people are judging us, they're hiding behind something, boys and girls. That's a camouflage. Because what they don't want is they don't want us to see the real them. Okay? And so our own evil. Matthew chapter 7, verse 13 says, enter through the narrow gate. Enter through the narrow gate. What is he talking about? Well, the cities in those days were surrounded by walls, and the gates were very narrow, and they called them eyes. It says, a rich man, it is easier for a camel to pass through the eye of a needle than a rich man to get into heaven. What they're saying, the camel's big, right? The eye of the needle is a very narrow opening for the camel to go through. So Matthew says, enter through the narrow gate. What does that mean? You got to get rid of some stuff. The secular world, the road is wide. It's like 84. You can bring all your junk with you. But to improve ourselves as better people and to make a better community, we got to let go of some stuff. We got to get through the narrow gate. We got to get rid of the judgmentality, the criticism, the condemning, even though sometimes the spirit is willing, but the flesh is weak. And that is the truth. Okay, we got a couple of minutes. We can go right to 29, I think, and hold off there. So enter through the narrow gate. What is good judging and what is bad judging? Matthew 7:18-20 says, good trees cannot bear bad fruit. Bad trees cannot have a good apple on it. The bad trees are going in the fire, and you could recognize a tree by the fruit it bears. What fruit are we bearing? Okay, so as we're going through life, and we're going to get into this after the break, the difference between judging and discernment. Big difference there. And that's how you can buy the tree and the fruit. So in life, we do have to make discernments, but when we judge, there's a difference, and I'm going to go through that briefly. We're going to explore that a little bit. Why don't we do the break now, Jock? It's 11:28 on my clock, and then we can get into discernment and judgment.
Okay, fine. Thank you so much, T-Boz. We want to take this opportunity to thank and recognize our sponsors for their generosity and support and allowing us to bring you the quality community radio programming that we're able to do at this time. I want to give a big, huge shout-out to the Nutmeg Conservatory for the Arts, Torrington Savings Bank, TDI, Torrington Distributors Incorporated, and Charlotte Hungerford Hospital. Thank you so very much. And we'll return the show back to T-Boz.
Here we go. So, judging. When we judge, that's usually a negative opinion of someone. We feel that we're better than someone. It comes from an inferiority complex. We'll talk about that later. So we're judging people. We don't have real facts. We're prejudice is a form of judgment, right? We're assuming that all Italians live a certain way, or all African Americans, or all Spanish, and we don't even have any facts. So those judgments, prejudice, fear, envy, that's what judgment is. It comes from a negative influence. Discernment, on the other hand, there's a fine line, but discernment has a positive feeling to it. You take actual facts and you make a decision based on it, right? And by the way, Sergeant Friday from Dragnet never said, just the facts, man, only the facts. That's the most misquoted thing about facts. He never said that. What he actually said is, all we want, ma'am, is the facts. So there you go. But so he was discerning. But when we're discerning, we want true facts. We want a clear picture of maybe the people. So as we're picking friends, maybe when our children are very little, as we're picking friends for ourselves, as we're making the decision with a group we want to get into, a political group, a church group, whatever it is, we want to go through a discerning process. We want to get real facts. We want to have a clear vision. We want to have a positive attitude. We want to have an open mind. There's something we all have to work on. We want to have an open mind, and then we want to discern what we want to do. That's a lot different than judging someone. We're going to get into the reasons why people judge. So discernment and judgment, you think they're the same, but they're not. An anonymous quote, and this is another thing I talked about, judging ourselves. Do not judge me by my past. I don't live there anymore. Boom. How many of us have maybe come to a Christian life, or maybe are now in a different political party than we were when we were younger? Okay, many of us, maybe there's a bunch of us who are enjoying sobriety. We've got rid of our gambling debt. Maybe we've made some business mistakes, and now we've got a better business, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. All right? But how many, sometimes family and friends, are still judging us by our past? We don't live there anymore. I talk about that a lot on this show. The past is the past. It's done. Forget it. Our scripture, our Bible never says stay. It always says go. And sometimes we could be our own worst judger because we still say, well, you know, I was with this group, or well, and we're beating ourselves up, and maybe it's our family and friends are saying, no, Frank, you can do it. But we're telling ourselves, putting ourselves in the past. But a lot of us have made changes in our lives, and our friends and families don't see it, and they're still judging us by our past. You don't live there anymore. Don't judge me, and boys and girls, don't judge yourself by your past. When people fail, a lot of times when people fail, the worst thing we could say is, oh, how could they? You know what we should say? We know how they could. Because every one of us is of human flesh. The soul is willing, the flesh is weak. All of us are flesh, and we've all made mistakes, whether go to college, not go to college, save for retirement, not save for retirement, whatever, right? The job we should have taken, the girl we should have married, the dog we should have bought. We've all made mistakes and challenges, but we judge ourselves and we let other people judge by the past. Not a good thing to do. Okay. Now, research says, why do we judge? Why do we judge people? All right. It has nothing to do with the other person. It has everything to do with the person who is judging. Judging comes from finiteness. In other words, there's infinite, which is right, and finite. What finite means is the person thinks that there's only so much beauty, there's only so much wealth, there's only so much talent, there's only so much ability, there's only so much opportunity to start a business, and then there's only so much love. The basis of judgmentality is the lack of love. People who grow up in non-loving households, doesn't have to be a two-parent household, because I have cousins that grew up in a divorced family. There was a lot of love there, okay? So we're not judging, right? But when you grow up in a non-existing, non-secure family life, then like Father John on another radio station says, the scars you get in childhood are deep. You get scars as an adult, but the scars of childhood stay with you for life. They're the deepest. And so what happens with people who have a judgmentality is that they haven't grown up in love. So they have this finite feeling that there's not enough to go around, definitely not love. They don't come from the mindset of, well, let's bake a bigger pie, right? Those of us who maybe you're not in that mindset feel, well, that guy had a business, and that girl is beautiful, and that guy is doing this, and that, not that we want to look at each other, but we notice people's accomplishments. All right, let's bake a bigger pie. Instead of judging them for what they did and picking on and pulling them apart, not discerning, but, criticizing everything they've done, let's bake a bigger pie so that we can have opportunity. We can have love. Okay, a lot of times, as I mentioned earlier, it comes from an inferiority complex. Okay, people are avoiding their potential for feelings of inferiority. They have shame. They have guilt. And so all of this baggage, right, is in there. You have to pray for these people. And so that's what they use while they're judging. Judging also destroys relationships. It destroys marriages, friendships, right? We see a lot of that. I hate to go there, but in our political thing today, there are family members that are not talking to each other. I don't think that's what the founding fathers intended, but it is what it is, okay? And so they're constantly in a situation. And so they feel that no one is beside them, and they're right. They abstract themselves from the family or their friendship, so no one is beside them, and they're not beside anyone. And most people who are harsh judges are loners, and this is what the research says. Now, we go to Romans chapter 2, verse 1 to 2. This is going to lead right into one of my favorite stories in the Bible, the adulterous woman. I'll tell you why. So here we go. Romans chapter 2, verse 1 to 2. You, therefore, have no excuse, you who pass judgment on someone else, okay? At whatever point you judge, you are condemning yourself, because you who pass judgment have done the same things. Boom. Why didn't the Pharisees and the Sadducees, when Jesus said, today the scripture has been revealed to you, why didn't they see that? They had God looking them right in the face. Why? Because they were judging him, because they too, we talk about that evil, they too were blinding themselves. And they, too, what Paul says right here is that they had no excuse to judge him because they have done bad things. And they couldn't see good because they were so blocked by what they thought the Messiah should be. We look at and that leads right into the adulterous woman. Very interesting story. All of us have heard the story of the adulterous woman, right? So a bunch of Pharisees and Sadducees, Jesus is sitting in the sand, right? And they drag this woman, and they say, we caught this woman in the very act of adultery. Now how did they know that? What were they, peeping in the window? She didn't have a car parked out front. They didn't say, oh, she's driving a 67 Ford Fairlane, right? They said they caught this woman in this act. But what probably we go back to hiding evil and done the same thing themselves. The reading and the research I've done is maybe the Pharisees who brought this woman to Jesus had adultery with them themselves. How else would they have known? She didn't have a business card. So now they drag her in front of Jesus. They say, by Mosaic law, this woman should be stoned to death. And they all got the rocks right, and they're ready to stone her to death. Jesus is writing in the sand with his finger. You know why? Because in Mosaic law, it also says when you convict someone, you have to have a written witness. What he was doing, he was writing the Pharisees and Sadducees and the other people's name in the ground. He knew that because he was God. And so they're ready to kill this woman, right? Like us, right? We're ready to throw the rock. And he looks and says, any of you without sin, cast the first stone. What did they do? They dropped the rocks. And they left. And then he looks at her with loving eyes and says, woman, where are your accusers? And he says, they don't condemn you, nor do I. John 3:17, God sent his son to the world not to condemn it, but to save it. Are we ready with rocks sometimes? Are we sometimes judging to make ourselves look good? Have we committed an evil? We're trying to hide it. Are we ready to convict someone without having evidence? They were setting Jesus up. Are we setting people up? Are we being manipulative because we want to make a point? Are we being judgmental because we want someone with us and not with them, just like in high school, the hip crowd, the in crowd, right? Put the rocks down, boys and girls. None of us is without sin. The soul is willing, but the flesh is weak. Yolanda Hadid, she was on Real Housewives of Beverly Hills, says this: some people come into our lives as a blessing, others come into our lives as a lesson. We've all had people in our lives a lesson. So do we love them for who they are, or do we judge them for who they are not? Wow. So people come into our lives, but Jock is a blessing, right? I didn't know him 2 years ago. I did a little radio stint with him. He said, why don't you come on once a month? Then it was twice a month. Now it's every week. Sorry, guys. All right. So he's been helping me promote my speaking career. He is a blessing. I've learned from him too, but then there's other people who have come into our lives as a lesson, what Yolanda's talking about, and we've made some mistakes. All right. And so, but in either way, do we judge them? Do we use love, or do we judge them for who they are not? Okay. Another great quote: before you judge, stop and think about all that God has forgiven you for. Boom. Going back to the evil, right? What Dietrich Bonhoeffer said, to hide our own evil, right? So before we start pointing the finger and throwing a rock, why don't we stop for a minute? See, the opposite of judgmentality and criticism and all of that is love, humility, kindness. It's all the stuff, like it says, Carnegie, we all want to criticize and condemn and complain. But how many of us want to be joyful and loving and happy? Those are things we want, but for some reason we're always in the 3 C's. Okay? But forgiveness. Okay, so before we judge someone, why don't we stop forgiving? Now, Mark Twain has a fabulous quote about forgiveness. This one you want to write down. Ready? Forgiveness is the fragrance that the violet sheds when the heel has crushed it. Isn't that beautiful? The smell of the violet after the heel has crushed it. Okay? Are we willing to be that fragrance, or are we, like the people with the adulterous one, ready to throw the first rock? Saint Mother Teresa says, if you're constantly judging people, you have no time to love them. So constantly we hear the same message over and over again about love. Love is the antidote against condemning and judging and all of that. 1 Corinthians chapter 4, verse 3. But to me, it is a very small thing that I may be examined by you. In fact, I do not even examine myself. Wow. So now we're going to get into a little bit, before we wrap up, about how to deal with people who are judging us. So Paul's saying, I don't even examine myself, right? What does Steve Miller say? You can't even run your own life. How you think you're going to run mine? Right? So, it was a great song by him, by the way. But so Paul says, I'm not even examining myself. Who are you to judge me? Now, Lulu says it like this, and those of you who remember Sidney Poitier in To Sir with Love, that great 1969 film about the teacher, and she says, when someone judges you, it isn't really about you. It's about them, their insecurities, their limitations, and their needs, right? Can't build a bigger pie. So as we're getting buffeted, and I guess today they call it bullying, right? Buffeted by, sometimes we hear judgment from other people. We hear it maybe through gossip, maybe someone tells us. Let me tell you something. If your friends are telling you what your friends said about you, that's a lesson. You got to get out of that lesson, all right? But we hear these things, and it hurts. Judgment hurts, all right? And so discernment doesn't hurt, but judgment hurts. So Lulu's saying it's not about you. It's about them. It's about them. John chapter 7, verse 24, do not judge by appearance, but with good judgment. You all heard, my father said it too, don't judge a book by its cover, right? My father used to say with the Beatles, we talked about music last week, right? When they came on the Ed Sullivan Show, the long hair, the guitars, oh, what is this? Then 10 years later, boy, the Beatles wrote beautiful music, because Sinatra started recording their music. Boy, so he saw the Beatles in a different way. He was able to discern their music rather than judge them by the way they look, okay? So John tells us right there, don't judge by appearance. Matthew 7, chapter 7, verse 3. Why do you look at the speck of dust in your brother's eye rather than the big plank in your own? And that's exactly what we've been talking about all morning, about those kinds of things. We're so quick to judge and criticize someone else when we have things ourselves we want to fix. It's easier to judge others by their mistakes instead of our own mistakes, right? So that's the speck in the eye. Easier to judge others by their mistakes. Oh, Frank should have done this. Oh, Mary should have done that, right? What about the plank in your eye? It all starts with us. If we want to build a better world, we have to build a better us. Charles Spurgeon says this: none are more unjust in their judgment of others than those who have high opinions of themselves. Boom. And that goes right back to Luke chapter 4, verse 21, when Jesus reveals the scriptures and they say, no, not you, blasphemy, whatever, because they had a high opinion of themselves. Let's lower the opinion of ourselves, boy and girls. Not us, our dreams and that, but let's come down to where we are and love other people. Let's not be standing way up high and thinking we're better than everyone. Let's get to our takeaway quote, and this is by Wayne Dyer, D-Y-E-R. This is our takeaway quote. This is a great one. Judging a person does not define who they are. It defines who you are. Boom. So who are you? Right? That song by The Who. Who are you? Who are you, boys and girls? Are you the people that want to convict the adulterous woman, or are you more what St. Mother Teresa says, loving people instead of convicting them? Are you someone, like the people who don't think there's a big enough pie, or are you falling more into what St. Paul says? I don't need you to judge me. I don't even judge myself. Or do you find yourself like in Yolanda Haddad saying that, we have lessons and blessings. Let's judge people let's not judge people for what they look like, but rather love them for who they are. So this is the lesson today. I hope there's a little bit there you can take away. I know we're talking to a good crowd of people, but take the time before we act, before we speak out, before we lash out, before St. Paul tells us in Corinthians, beware. And we have to beware because the evil one is constantly trying to ruin us. And we have a higher authority. There is one final judge that we are going to have. We want to be ready for it. Jock, you want to tie a bow and then play the song?
I think something that you touched upon today, which it just goes to show that there's an evolutionary process in terms of understanding how the Word of God manifests itself. But you focused on the fact that Jesus came to save the world, not to condemn it. And when you think about that in terms of its totality, that means opportunity. He gives us opportunity to self-reflect, to self-govern, to build community through the church or whatever means, so that we can have fellowship one another, to extend his attributes of the fruits of the Spirit. And judgment, especially one sin that I think is a sin, but we kind of overlook it, is casting false blame. And that's a huge sin because you're breaking down whatever God is trying to build up in that person or individual. So I think we can clearly see why that is such a destructive sentiment to have within your persona. But looking in terms of how we can embellish the best that we have and bring that out in each other is definitely an alternative. I think that when you talk in terms of, God's will, what He wants for all of us. It would be to support each other and understand each other to make us whole and complete human beings.
You're absolutely right. And it says in Galatians, you hit on it, it says in Galatians, and the Spirit will soften your heart. And I think we have hardened hearts, and just as you alluded to, we can't see the good in people, and then we're blocking the blessings and the goodness that God wants to create in everyone. Everyone is a child of God, no matter what we think. It's not important. And we deserve to see the people in a better light. Your words are right in line with mine, as they usually are, and I thought you were right on there.
Well, as always, T, we wait each week now to hear, what you prepared for us, and it's so uplifting and so edifying, and definitely gives us something to ponder as we go forward in our day. And it's always good to have these little gems and these little tidbits of motivation, so that we can do whatever we can to make our world a better place to live.
Absolutely. Everyone, I won't be here next week due to the holiday schedule, so enjoy the 4th of July, get those flags out there, and be thankful that we're in this great country. It's not perfect, but it is a great country, and God bless America. Jock, spin the song, and happy Friday Eve. Jock, you have a wonderful holiday. We'll see you in 2 weeks.
Thanks, T-Boz.
Bye-bye.